The gunshot echoed across the Montana prairie like thunder trapped in a valley. I peered through the swirling snow, Winchester 1873 steady in my grip. February 1885 had brought the harshest winter in my 5 years on this land. But tonight, something colder than the blizzard had come to my doorstep. I spotted movement through the white curtain, a figure stumbling through knee-deep drifts, pursued by shadowy forms on horseback. Training from another life took over. I sighted down the barrel, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The shot kicked up snow near the lead rider. A warning? Not meant to kill, but enough to send a message. The riders retreated into the storm's embrace, leaving their prey collapsed in the snow. A trail of crimson stained the pristine white blood, stark and accusing against nature's canvas. I approached cautiously, rifle ready. War in 5 years as a territorial marshal had taught me caution before compassion. The figure lay face down, clutching something to their chest. I turned them over with my boot. A woman, young, maybe mid-20s, bleeding from a shoulder wound, skin pale as the moon above. She clutched a leather portfolio, knuckles white with determination, even in unconsciousness. Death was stalking her through the blizzard, but it hadn't claimed her yet. "Help," she whispered, eyes fluttering open briefly before darkness claimed her again. I lifted her. She weighed almost nothing and carried her to my cabin. The wound was clean. Bullet passed straight through her shoulder. Lucky. I'd seen men die from less. I cleaned the wound with whiskey, stitched it closed with practiced hands. Skills learned patching up boys in blue during the war, now used on a stranger who'd brought trouble to my door. While she slept, I examined what she'd been protecting. A map with my ranch marked with a red X. My stomach tightened. Nobody knew I was here except supply riders and a few townsfolk in Clearwater. Nobody who'd marked my location like a target. Beneath the map lay documents bearing the seal of the territorial court. One caught my eye, a warrant with the signature of Judge William Sullivan. A name from another life, from before Sarah and Emma, before the fever took them and left me a hollow man. I poured 3 fingers of whiskey and studied the woman. Fine hands with practical calluses, quality clothing beneath trail dust and blood. Not a drifter or common criminal. The puzzle deepened when I found a small badge sewn inside her coat, the mark of the Sullivan household staff. Outside, the blizzard howled like a wounded beast, trapping us together until dawn. I settled into my chair, rifle across my knees, watch in hand. The photograph inside showed Sarah and Emma, forever frozen in time, forever smiling, 5 years gone. Yet the pain remained sharp as winter air. The woman stirred near dawn, fever dreams making her restless. "Father," she murmured, "the documents. Find Morgan." Morgan. My name, but not the one I use now. Ethan Morgan had died at Vicksburg, or so I'd let the world believe. The man who lived in this cabin was just Ethan, a rancher with no past worth mentioning. Her eyes snapped open suddenly, alert despite the fever. She tried to rise, then gasped as pain lanced through her shoulder. "Easy," I said, pressing her back. "That bullet took a fair piece of your shoulder." Fear and defiance warred in her eyes. "Where am I?" "My ranch, about 15 miles east of Clearwater." "Who are you?" "Ethan. Most folks who show up bleeding on my doorstep offer their name in return." She studied me, weighing risk against necessity. "Catherine," she said finally. The lie came easily to her lips. I recognized the skill, had used it myself often enough. "Try again," I said coldly. "I found Judge Sullivan's warrant in your possession. Stealing court documents is a hanging offense in the territories." Her face hardened. "Those men who were chasing me, they'll come back. We're both in danger if they find me here. Then honesty might be your best chance of survival." I laid the map on the bed beside her, starting with why my ranch is marked like buried treasure. She closed her eyes briefly. Decision made. "My name is Emma Sullivan. Judge William Sullivan was my father." "Was?" "He was murdered 3 days ago, shot in his study." Her voice remained steady, but tears gathered in her eyes. They took his case files, but he'd hidden these documents, evidence of land fraud along the Northern Pacific Railroad route. I kept my expression neutral despite the jolt of recognition. William Sullivan, dead. The man who'd stood with me at Vicksburg, who'd saved my life more times than I could count. Before he died, she continued, he told me if anything happened to him, I should find a man named Morgan, said to mention the Montana Project. The Montana Project. 3 words I hadn't heard in 15 years, from a war most tried to forget, a code between 3 men, Sullivan, myself, and Victor Harmon. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. If Emma had been directed to find me through that code, William hadn't just been murdered, he'd been betrayed by someone who knew our past, someone like Victor. Who killed your father? My voice had gone dangerously quiet. A man named Victor Harmon. He claims to represent the Northern Pacific Railroad, but what he really does is acquire land for them by any means necessary. Her voice hardened, including murder. Outside, the first gray light of dawn touched the snow-covered landscape. My secluded existence had just been shattered by ghosts from a past I'd buried alongside my wife and daughter. Those men who were chasing you, they'll be back, I said, checking my Winchester's action. And when they come, they'll bring hell with them. The boy arrived around noon, his wagon struggling through snowdrifts. Jamie Cooper, 12 years old, son of the storekeeper in Clearwater, making his monthly delivery of supplies. I hurried outside to intercept him before he could see into the cabin where Emma rested. Mr. Ethan, he greeted me, breath fogging in the cold. Got your supplies. Pa added extra coffee, said you'd need it with this cold spell. I helped unload the wagon, keeping Jamie talking about town gossip to distract him from my unusual alertness. Strangers came through town yesterday, he mentioned as we carried the last crate. 3 men asking about ranches out this way. My hand tightened on the crate. What sort of men? Hard-looking. Leader wears a silver star, calls himself Sheriff Dawson from Wyoming Territory. Pa says he doesn't talk like any lawman he ever met. What were they asking about specifically? Ranches along the northern ridge. Jamie lowered his voice conspiratorially. They showed a wanted poster for a woman, said she murdered a judge. I kept my face neutral. People pass through Clearwater all the time with stories. Most are just that, stories. As Jamie turned to leave, a crash came from inside the cabin, his young face lit with curiosity. Someone else here, Mr. Ethan? I placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Jamie, listen, those men in town, they're dangerous. If they ask about me or my place, you haven't been here in weeks, understand? He nodded, suddenly serious. Is it about the lady they're looking for? My heart sank. The boy was too observant for his own good. What makes you think there's a lady? Heard coughing. Sounded like my ma when she's sick. His eyes were wide but unafraid. She in trouble, ain't she? I studied him carefully. At 12, Jamie straddled the line between boy and man, with a man's sense of right but a boy's vulnerability. Yes, bad trouble, which is why you need to forget you heard anything. Pa says a man stands by his friends, even when it's risky. Your father's a good man, which is why he'd want you safe. I pressed a silver dollar into his palm. Ride straight home. Don't talk to strangers along the way. After Jamie left, I bolted the door and began preparations. From beneath floorboards, I retrieved a wooden chest untouched for 5 years. Inside lay remnants of Marshal Ethan Morgan, a Colt peacemaker with ivory grips, a sawed-off shotgun, boxes of ammunition, and a marshal's badge tarnished with age. Emma watched from the doorway, pale but determined. You are a lawman. In another life. I checked the peacemaker's action, muscle memory returning like an old friend. These men hunting you, they'll come at nightfall. We need to be ready. I laid weapons across the table, the Winchester, peacemaker, shotgun, and hunting knife. Can you shoot? She picked up the Colt with practiced ease. My father taught me, though it's been some time. We'll see about that. I led her outside to the woodpile, set up empty cans as targets. Show me. She fired 1, 2, 3 shots. 2 cans flew into the air. The third remained untouched. Not bad, I allowed. But if you hesitate against Dawson's men, you'll die. Again. We practiced until her hands were steady, her shots true. Between rounds, I taught her what I knew of Victor Harmon, how we'd fought together in the war, how something had changed in him at Vicksburg. After the war, he went west like many of us, used connections to secure a position with the railroad. I reloaded the Colt methodically. Your father kept tabs on him over the years. The Montana Project was our way of sharing information about criminal activities without raising suspicion. You think my father was killed because of what he discovered about the railroad? I nodded grimly. The Northern Pacific is the biggest venture in the territories. Billions in government contracts, land grants large as eastern states. Men have killed for far less. As afternoon shadows lengthened, we fortified the cabin, blocking windows, creating firing positions, planning escape routes. Through it all, I felt something awakening within me, something buried with Sarah and Emma: purpose, responsibility, the weight of a badge I discarded years ago. They came at dusk, 3 riders materializing from the fading light like specters. I watched through my spyglass as they approached Dawson in front, silver star pinned to his coat, 2 others flanking him, hands never far from their weapons. Stay inside, I instructed Emma. Whatever happens, don't show yourself unless I signal. I stepped onto the porch, Winchester held casual but ready. Something I can help you with, gentlemen? Dawson dismounted, snow crunching beneath his boots. Tall, broad-shouldered, with cold eyes that assessed everything. Not a real lawman I'd known enough to spot the difference. This man was a killer wearing a badge for convenience. Sheriff Harlan Dawson, Wyoming Territory. He introduced himself, touching his hat brim. These are my deputies, Caldwell and Holloway. We're tracking a fugitive believed to be in this area. I kept my expression neutral. Don't get many visitors out this way, especially in winter. What kind of fugitive? Dawson produced a wanted poster. Woman named Emma Sullivan, wanted for the murder of her father, Judge William Sullivan, and theft of territorial documents. I studied the crude drawing. Despite the artist's poor rendering, Emma's likeness was recognizable. Murder's a serious charge. The most serious, Dawson agreed, watching my reaction. Witnesses saw her fleeing the judge's home the night of the killing. Haven't seen anyone matching that description, I said, handing back the poster. Just me out here since before the storm. Dawson's eyes flickered to the cabin, then back to me. Mind if we take a look around? I do mind, I replied coolly. This is private property, and your jurisdiction ends at the Wyoming border, Sheriff. Tension crackled between us like static before a lightning strike. His hand drifted toward his Remington. Mine stayed deliberately away from the Winchester's trigger. Morgan? He said finally, watching my face. Ethan Morgan. Thought you looked familiar. I felt ice form in my veins. He shouldn't have known that name. Name's Ethan. Just Ethan. A smile touched his lips, never reaching his eyes. My mistake. He reached into his coat and extended a folded paper. If you do spot Sullivan's daughter, she's dangerous. There's a reward for information. I pocketed the paper without looking at it. I'll keep that in mind. The trio mounted and rode away, but the encounter left ice in my veins. They knew who I was. The question was, how much did Victor know? Inside the cabin, I unfolded Dawson's note. Not a reward offer, but a message. Victor wants to talk. Midnight, Clearwater Saloon. Come alone. I showed it to Emma, whose hands trembled slightly. It's a trap. Probably, I agreed. But it might be our only chance to find out exactly what your father discovered. You can't go, she protested. These men killed my father in his own home. If they wanted me dead, they would have tried to take me here, I reasoned. The fact they're inviting me to town suggests they want something else. The documents, Emma realized. I nodded. Which gives us leverage, however slight. Night fell across the Montana prairie, stars emerging like silver dollars scattered across black velvet. I checked my weapons one final time, peacemaker holstered at my hip, derringer tucked in my boot, knife at my belt. If I'm not back by dawn, I told Emma, There's a false floor in the barn under the northeast stall. Emergency supplies, money, and a good horse. Head east toward Fort Benton. Ask for Captain James Wilson. He served with your father and me. He'll help you." Her eyes met mine. Fear and determination mingled. "Be careful." "Careful got left behind at Vicksburg," I replied, mounting my horse. "I'll settle for alive." Clearwater was a small settlement, a handful of buildings defying the wilderness around them. The saloon stood at the far end of the single street, light spilling from beneath its door like blood from a wound. I tied my horse at a distance, noting others already present, including the mounts I'd seen at my ranch. Checking the peacemaker once more, I entered the saloon. Warmth and noise assaulted me: a piano player half asleep at his instrument, a bartender polishing glasses, and at a back table, 4 men. 3 I recognized from earlier. The 4th made my blood run cold. Victor Harmon sat with his back to the wall, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. Time had been kind to him, expensively dressed, well-fed, with the confident air of a man accustomed to power. When he spotted me, a smile spread across his face. "Ethan Morgan," he called, rising. "It's been too long." I approached cautiously, acutely aware of Dawson and his men watching my every move. "Victor, last I heard you were heading to San Francisco." "Plans change." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, join me. Drink?" "I prefer to keep a clear head." Victor's smile faltered slightly. "Always the cautious one. I've missed that about you." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "I'll make this simple. You have something that belongs to me. Return it, and we can part as friends." "Judge Sullivan's documents, you mean?" I said, watching his reaction. "Strange that you'd think they belong to you, considering they detail your involvement in fraud and murder." Victor's expression hardened. William was a misguided man who interfered in matters beyond his understanding. His death was regrettable but necessary. He slid a document across the table. "Your property sits at a critical junction for the new rail line. The Northern Pacific is prepared to offer twice its value." I left the paper untouched. "And if I refuse?" "Then Sheriff Dawson will discover you've been harboring a fugitive," Victor replied smoothly. "In the ensuing arrest, both you and Miss Sullivan will resist. Tragic, but these things happen in the territories." "That's your offer? Sell my land or die?" "I prefer to think of it as a business proposition with clear consequences. I studied the man across from me, once my friend, once someone who'd saved my life, now a stranger discussing murder with a smile." "The woman isn't at my ranch," I said finally. "She left this morning with the documents, heading for Fort Benton to meet with the federal marshal there." Dawson half rose. "You're lying." "Check if you want," I shrugged. "You won't find her." Victor's expression remained calm, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "If you're telling the truth, that's unfortunate for you." He nodded to Dawson. "Ensure, mister. Morgan doesn't leave town tonight. We'll verify his story at first light." "And if I am telling the truth?" I asked. "Then you'll still need to decide about my offer," Victor replied, rising. "But you'll make that decision from a grave." As Victor left, Dawson and Holloway closed in. Caldwell moved to block the door. I tensed, preparing for the fight, but too late sensed movement behind me. Something heavy struck the back of my head. The saloon tilted sideways as darkness rushed in. The last thing I heard was Dawson's voice, distant as an echo. "Put him in the cellar. We ride for his ranch at dawn." Consciousness returned slowly, pain pulsing through my skull in time with my heartbeat. I lay on packed earth, hands bound behind my back, mouth gagged. The cellar beneath Clearwater's saloon, cool, damp, smelling of earth and spirits. How long had I been unconscious? Hours, judging by the stiffness in my limbs. Dawn might already be approaching, Victor's men preparing to raid my ranch. Emma would be alone, unprepared for what was coming. I tested my bonds tight, professional. Dawson knew his business. The knife in my boot was gone, as was the derringer. 5 years of peace had made me careless. A soft sound from above caught my attention, footsteps outside the cellar doors, then the scrape of a key in the lock. I tensed, preparing for Dawson or his men, but the figure that slipped through the crack was much smaller. Jamie Cooper eased the cellar door closed behind him, a lantern held low, face tight with fear and determination. He froze when he saw me watching him. "Mr. Morgan?" he whispered, approaching cautiously. "Pa sent me to fetch a keg. Didn't know you was down here till I heard something moving." I made a muffled sound against the gag. Jamie hesitated only briefly before setting down the lantern and removing the cloth from my mouth. "They're going to your ranch at dawn," he whispered urgently. "Heard them talking. Said they'd burn it down with the lady inside." "How long till dawn?" My voice was raw. 2 hours, maybe less. "Listen to me, Jamie. I need you to find something to cut these ropes. Quick now." The boy produced a pocket knife from his boot. Pa says a man should always carry a blade. He sawed at the ropes, binding my wrists, hands trembling but determined. As the bonds fell away, blood rushed painfully back into my hands. "Is there a back way out of here?" Jamie nodded. "Delivery entrance behind the barrels. Nobody watches it this time of night." "Good lad." I squeezed his shoulder. "Now comes the dangerous part. I need you to create a distraction, something to keep them looking the wrong way while I slip out." Fear flickered across his young face, but he nodded. "What kind of distraction?" "The horses tied outside. Cut them loose, make some noise, then run straight home and stay there." Jamie's expression hardened with resolve. "I can do it." "One more thing," I added as he turned to go. "If I don't make it back to my ranch in time, ride to Fort Benton. Find Captain James Wilson at the military post. Tell him Judge Sullivan's daughter needs help." He repeated the instructions, then slipped away up the cellar stairs. I collected my confiscated weapons from a shelf where Holloway had carelessly left them, then positioned myself near the delivery entrance, counting heartbeats. Minutes later, shouts erupted from the streetmen cursing, horses whinnying, hooves thundering on packed snow. Jamie had done his part. I slipped through the rear exit into the bitter cold of the Montana night. My horse was gone, likely taken by Dawson's men. No matter, I knew where to find another. The livery stable stood dark and quiet at the edge of town. Inside, half a dozen horses dozed in their stalls. I chose a sturdy bay gelding, saddled him quickly, and led him out the back door. Only when we'd cleared the town did I spur the horse into a gallop, pushing hard through the snow-crusted landscape. Emma had perhaps an hour before Dawson's men arrived, if that. Not enough time to flee, but maybe enough to prepare. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten when I spotted the familiar silhouette of my cabin. No smoke rose from the chimney. Emma had followed my instructions to maintain a low profile. But something was wrong. The barn door stood open, swinging gently in the pre-dawn breeze. I approached cautiously, peacemaker drawn. Inside the barn, signs of recent activity, saddlebags missing. My best horse gone. Emma had fled. Whether from immediate danger or following my contingency plan, I couldn't tell. A sound from the cabin caught my attention, a soft scraping. I crossed the yard in a crouch, using the woodpile for cover. Through the window, I glimpsed movement, a figure searching through my belongings. Not Emma. One of Dawson's men, sent ahead as a scout. I circled to the back door, eased it open silently. The floorboard that always creaked, I avoided it by instinct. The man didn't hear me until the peacemaker's barrel pressed against the base of his skull. "Looking for something?" I asked quietly. He froze, hands half raised. "Morgan." "Where's Dawson?" "Half hour behind me. Harmon's with them." Interesting. Victor had decided to oversee matters personally. "The woman who was here, where is she?" "Gone before I arrived." Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold. "Listen, I'm just following orders." "So am I," I replied, striking him with the peacemaker's grip. He crumpled, unconscious but alive. I bound and gagged him, then dragged him to the root cellar. He'd live, unless his friends burned down the cabin with him beneath it. I had 20 minutes, perhaps 30, to prepare a welcome for Dawson and Victor. Not enough time for elaborate traps, but sufficient for what I had in mind. I gathered what I needed: coal oil from the lamps, my remaining ammunition, rags, and rope. Working quickly, I created firing positions with clear lines of sight to the approach. A tripwire near the front door connected to a suspended shotgun, crude but effective. The barn, I prepared differently. Coal oil soaked into hay bales, positioned strategically, with a clear trail leading to a hidden lantern. When everything was ready, I took position in the loft of the barn, Winchester loaded, Peacemaker at my side. From here, I could see anyone approaching from any direction, while remaining hidden myself. The wait wasn't long. 6 riders appeared from the east, silhouetted against the rising Sunday. Dawson in the lead, Victor and Holloway behind him, 3 others I didn't recognize bringing up the rear. They approached cautiously, spreading out to surround the cabin. I sighted down the Winchester, crosshairs settling on Dawson's chest. At this distance, the shot was certain, but killing him immediately would alert the others. Better to wait, let them commit to their approach. They reached the cabin, Dawson signaling 2 men to circle around back. Victor remained mounted, watching from a distance, always the strategist, letting others take the risks. Holloway and Dawson approached the front door, weapons drawn. I squeezed the trigger. The shot took Holloway in the leg, dropping him with a howl of pain. Before Dawson could react, I fired again, the bullet splintering wood inches from his head. He dove for cover behind the water trough. The battle erupted in earnest bullets whining through the air, men shouting orders. I fired methodically, forcing them to keep their heads down, preventing a coordinated assault on my position. One of Victor's men made a dash for the cabin door. The tripwire caught his ankle, triggering the suspended shotgun. The blast caught him full in the chest, throwing him backward into the snow. 4 left. Dawson remained pinned behind the water trough. The 2 who had circled the cabin were approaching the barn from opposite sides. Victor had retreated to the tree line, watching through field glasses, calculating, always calculating. I shifted position, crawling to the rear loft window. One of the men had reached the barn door, was easing it open cautiously. "Looking for me?" I called from above. He looked up, startled. I dropped a lit lantern onto the coal-soaked hay. Flames erupted instantly, racing along the prepared trail. The man screamed, stumbling back as fire engulfed the lower level. I swung down from the loft using a prepared rope, landing behind the barn as flames consumed it. Smoke billowed into the morning sky, the signal I'd arranged with Emma if things went wrong. Gunfire still came from Dawson's position, keeping me pinned behind the barn. The 5th man had disappeared from sight, a concerning development. I checked my ammunition. 6 rounds left in the Winchester, 4 in the Peacemaker. Not enough for a prolonged fight. A movement caught my eye. Victor, breaking from the tree line, riding hard not toward the cabin but toward the creek, escaping while his men provided cover. Typical. I was about to pursue when pain exploded in my side. The 5th man had flanked me, his bullet finding its mark between my ribs. I spun, Peacemaker clearing leather by instinct, firing twice. My attacker fell, weapon discharging harmlessly into the ground. Blood soaked my shirt, hot against the cold air. The wound wasn't immediately fatal, but it would slow me down. I pressed my hand against it, trying to stem the flow. Dawson was advancing now, moving from cover to cover. I retreated toward the creek, following Victor's trail. Blood marked my path in the snow, impossible to hide. But I had one advantage. I knew these lands. They didn't. The creek bed dropped suddenly, creating a natural fortification. I slid down the embankment, leaving a bloody smear on the snow. Above, Dawson's voice called out, "It's over, Morgan. Throw out your weapon." I remained silent, conserving strength. The hidden entrance to the escape tunnel was just 20 yards downstream, concealed by brush. If I could reach it, footsteps crunched on snow above. Dawson, approaching the edge. I raised the Peacemaker, waiting. His head appeared at the embankment's edge, silhouetted against the morning sky. I squeezed the trigger. Click. Empty. The Peacemaker had fired its last round. Dawson smiled, leveling his Remington at my chest. "Any last words, Morgan?" A rifle shot cracked the air. Dawson's expression changed from triumph to confusion. He toppled forward, rolling down the embankment to land motionless beside me. Standing at the creek's edge was Emma Sullivan, rifle smoking in her hands. Behind her, mounted men in blue uniforms, soldiers from Fort Benton, led by a figure I recognized even after 15 years, Captain James Wilson. "You're late," I managed, the world starting to blur at the edges. Wilson dismounted, sliding down the embankment to my side. "You're bleeding all over my territory, Morgan. Some things never change." As soldiers secured the area, Emma knelt beside me, pressing a bandage to my wound. "Jamie found us on the road," she explained. "Said you needed help." "Smart boy," I murmured as darkness began to close in. "Victor?" "Gone," Wilson reported grimly. "But we'll find him." I nodded, strength fading. "Make sure you do. He doesn't leave loose ends." The last thing I saw before consciousness fled was Emma's face, determined despite her fear, and beyond her, the burning remains of the life I'd built after the war. A life now consumed by the past I'd tried to escape. I awoke in the military hospital at Fort Benton, bandaged and weak but alive. 3 days had passed, the doctor informed me. The bullet had missed vital organs by inches, another dead ode to luck. Emma visited daily, bringing news from the outside world. Victor Harmon had vanished, but his network was unraveling. Arrests had been made in Helena. The governor had issued statements distancing himself from the railroad land acquisitions. "Your friend Captain Wilson has been busy," she told me on the 4th day. Federal marshals raided Northern Pacific offices in Helena. They found documents linking Victor to territorial officials, judges, even a United States senator. "William always was thorough," I said, struggling to sit upright. "He wouldn't have moved against Victor without solid evidence." "There's more," Emma continued. "Father maintained a safety deposit box in Helena under an alias Jonathan Fairchild. Captain Wilson believes the box may contain additional evidence. We need to access that box before Victor's allies realize it exists." Emma nodded. "As soon as you're strong enough to travel?" That journey came sooner than the doctor recommended. A week after the showdown at my ranch, we departed for Helena under military escort, 6 soldiers commanded by Wilson himself. The territorial capital was a far cry from my isolated ranch brick buildings, boardwalks, the trappings of Eastern civilization imposed on the Western landscape. The Continental Bank occupied an imposing stone building on the main street, its marble columns proclaiming permanence and stability. Inside, Emma approached the head clerk. "I need to access a safety deposit box under the name Jonathan Fairchild." After verification through a security question only Emma could answer, what was found beneath the willow on Emma's 16th birthday? We were escorted to a private viewing room with a lockbox. Inside lay documents more damning than I'd imagined, evidence linking Victor to territorial officials, correspondence with the governor, telegrams to senators, all detailing a conspiracy that reached from Montana to Washington. "This is why Father was killed," Emma whispered, "not just for land fraud, but for uncovering corruption at the highest levels." As we secured the documents, an urgent message arrived from Wilson. Victor Harmon had been found dead in his hotel room, apparently poisoned. "Someone's eliminating witnesses," I concluded grimly. "The men behind this conspiracy are cleaning house." "Which makes us targets," Emma realized. Under heavy guard, we delivered the evidence to federal judge Michael Callahan, who had arrived from Washington to preside over territorial court sessions. The white-haired jurist examined the documents with growing alarm. "This corruption reaches further than I feared," he said finally. "I'll issue federal warrants immediately." As we left the courthouse, Emma walked beside me, her face thoughtful. "What happens now, Ethan?" Before I could respond, gunfire erupted from a nearby alley. Wilson shoved Emma to safety as I drew my revolver, a new Colt purchased in Helena to replace the empty Peacemaker. Dawson's surviving men had made one final attempt to silence us. In the ensuing gunfight, I took a bullet in the arm but remained standing. When it ended, our attackers lay dead or captured in the street. Judge Callahan moved swiftly after the attack. Warrants were issued for the governor's arrest. The senator faced ethics investigations in Washington. Justice, delayed but not denied. 3 months passed. Spring came to Montana Territory, melting snow, revealing green valleys and newborn calves. On the site of my destroyed ranch, construction crews raised new buildings, a main house larger than before, and nearby, a schoolhouse for children from outlying homesteads. I stood on the porch, watching workers place the final roof beams. My left arm, still healing from the bullet wound, hung in a sling. But the pain had lessened, as had the nightmares that had plagued me since the war. Wilson rode up, dismounting with the ease of a man born to the saddle. "The schoolhouse looks good," he observed, joining me on the porch. "Never figured you for a builder." "Destruction's easier," I admitted. "Building takes patience." Speaking of building, Wilson reached into his saddlebag and produced an envelope. "Judge Callahan asked me to deliver this personally." Inside was an official document, my appointment as the new territorial marshal for the Northern District. My old badge, polished and restored, lay beneath it. "I put away the badge for a reason, James." "And now you have a reason to pick it up again." Wilson's expression was serious. "The territories need good men, Ethan. Men who understand both justice and mercy." "I'll think about it." Wilson nodded, satisfied for now. As he prepared to leave, he handed me a telegraph message. "This came through yesterday. Thought you should see it." The message was brief but chilling. "HH arriving Helena next month. Connections to VH confirmed. Exercise caution." "Herbert Hollister," Wilson explained. "Railroad executive from Chicago, rumored associate of Victor Harmon." The conspiracy wasn't over merely wounded, adapting, finding new leadership. Keep me informed. After Wilson departed, Emma emerged from the main house, carrying coffee. The past months had changed her grief, softened by purpose, fear replaced by determination. She'd used her inheritance to establish the school, hiring teachers from back east. Was that Captain Wilson I saw riding away? I handed her the badge and appointment. "Seems I've been drafted back into service." She studied my face. "Will you accept?" "A man can't outrun his nature forever," I said, watching the Montana landscape stretch away before us. "This territory's growing. It needs law that serves everyone, not just the wealthy and connected." Like my father believed. She smiled, a rare full smile that reached her eyes. He would approve. "The school opens next month?" She nodded. 28 children already enrolled. Jamie Cooper's at the top of the list, insisted on being first. "Smart boy, he'll go far." We stood in companionable silence, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and purple. The new marshal's badge caught the fading light, gleaming with promise and responsibility. "There's a United States Marshal position opening in Helena when statehood comes," Emma mentioned casually. "Judge Callahan suggested you might be considered." I raised an eyebrow. "Planning my career now?" "Planning for a future," she corrected softly. "Something neither of us thought we'd have 3 months ago." In the distance, a rider approached another messenger from Helena with news of the ongoing investigations. There would be more battles, more challenges as the territory grew toward statehood. I touched the cold at my hip, a lawman's habit renewed. The conspiracy that had killed William Sullivan had tentacles reaching to Washington. Cutting one head didn't kill the beast. Herbert Hollister and others would continue what Victor had begun, using different methods but the same ruthless ambition. They would come again, in time, and when they did, they would find not a reclusive rancher but a territorial marshal waiting for them. Not a man running from his past, but one who had reclaimed it, along with his purpose. "We should head inside," Emma suggested. "It's getting cold." I nodded, but remained a moment longer, watching the horizon where stars began to appear. Behind me stood a new beginning, a school, a home rebuilt from ashes. Before me stretched Montana Territory, vast and promising, its future not yet written. This time, I would have a hand in shaping that future. Badge on my chest, gun at my side, and for the first time in 5 years, someone worth protecting besides myself. "Marshal Morgan, I tested the title, finding it fit better than expected. Has a certain ring to it,